guys, hope everybody's doing okay. Hope everyone is safe. Hopefully your families are safe and everything is kind of getting back to a sense of normalcy. I'm gonna put this video on Canvas. I'll also set it up as a tiny URL so that if any of your friends, you could text them and let them know. This is kind of a review for the test that we're gonna have on Monday when we get back. Remember, this test is on chapter 6. Please know that. And this chapter is about the classical era, those empires during the classical era. So we're going to kind of break this up into kind of 4 major categories, and then there's some additional things that I'm going to tell you. I also have my notes that I've taken that I'm going to try to take a picture of and load it up on Canvas. So you might want to go ahead and pause the video, make sure that you grab something to write with and write on, so that you can take notes on this, okay? Hopefully you've read all of chapter 6 and we're good to go. Now, so the 4 categories that we're going to kind of look at, and then some additional items that I'm going to tell you about, are China, India, the Roman Empire, and patriarchal societies, kind of the makeup of patriarchal societies and its effect on the classical era during this time, and especially women, how women fared during that time. So the first category we're going to look at is China. Remember that China has these civil service exams that they kind of came about during Confucius era. These civil service exams were meant for where you no longer got a job just because it was inherited, meaning you no longer got the job because your father or your uncle, and it was just handed down to you, and maybe you weren't able to do the job, you just got the job because you had been born into that family. So that no longer was that way, and what had been created were these civil service exams that you had to take this test, and you had to perform well on this test in order to have be able to get this position. We have the same thing here in the United States. Our government also has these civil service exams. Our military has this. In order to become a chief in the Navy, or any upper rank in any of our military, you have to take an exam and pass this exam in order to continue to go higher. So make sure that you know about the civil service exams. The next thing I want to say about China is the state is actually the one that is creating the social structure for China. And this is a little bit different than what we have seen before, but the state is actually shaping the organization, how it's formed. When I say it, I'm referring to the social structure in China. Now, because 90% of the population in China are peasants. 90% are peasants, okay? So because of this and the hardships that they have, and I'm saying about hardships, I'm meaning things like natural disasters, Irma, natural disasters that happen, and you have 90% of your population that way, so you can't really get help from anybody else. So natural disasters and their inability to handle those natural disasters. You have an unfair tax code, meaning you're heavily taxing the peasants at this point, and then you have high rents, and the landlords, as we did the day where we had the station set up and we were sending messages on Padlet and all that. What you have is these high rents, and people aren't able to pay the rents. You have also this required military service. So no matter what, you had to go into the military now and provide military service. Now, we kind of have that here in the United States at this point, but it's not enacted right now. It's called selective service, and all young men at the age of 18 have to apply to the civil service. And what it means is it's saying that in case there was ever a dip and we needed to increase our military, that you are expected to go into the military. So, but for China, remember these items that I just talked about, the natural disasters, the increase in taxes, the very high, unproportionate rents, and then the required military service. These are all hardships that are on the peasants. When you have 90% of your population that are having these hardships and no one's helping them, then you're going to have a revolt, okay? It's throughout time, throughout history, throughout the world, history, you're going to have that happen. Anytime you have a large portion of population that is being mistreated or that is not being cared for and they outnumber the others, you're going to have a revolt. And that's exactly what these peasant rebellions that happen, okay? Remember when we did this, the activity where we walked around and we were acting as we were we went and looked to see how each other viewed. We had Wang Mang was one of our stations. So remember with Wang Mang, he was kind of the champion of the poor people. You could even look at him as maybe like, if you're thinking of something, you could look at him as like the Robin Hood, okay? So he kind of took from the rich and gave to the poor items. So remember, one of the things that he did that really helped the peasants is that he provided, when he got into control, he provided government loans to peasant families. And then kind of the last item, not the last item, but the last item I'm going to talk about right now for China during the classical period is that we have Taoism. So Taoism, remember, has this this ideology of you need to take care of things yourself. And so if you are being mistreated, then you need to figure out a way to handle that yourself. So remember the day that we did Taoism, Confucianism, and legalism, okay? So remember the Taoism was you just had to, it was all about self. So when you have 90% of the population that is having to, that Taoism is coming in, and so what you're having is you're having people go, wait a minute, this is wrong, we need to handle this ourselves, we need to make sure that they know that they can't do this to us. So this Taoism, remember, provides the ideology, provides the ideas, kind of the foundation that's going to allow these peasant rebellions to begin to happen. All right, so now let's jump to India. So in India, remember, I need you to know about Jatis. So now the Jati system will allow for some movement within, but very, very little. And the only way to do that is if you can somehow or another get the ability to acquire land. Remember, land equals wealth in India. So make sure that you know about the caste system and how its inequalities, they're going to be supported by Hinduism. So you make sure that you know about the caste system, make sure you know about Hinduism. And the reason, or how it kind of supports the caste system and its inequalities is because it says that it's this ideology of karma, dharma, and rebirth. So if you're at a lower level, when you do good, when you come back, you're at a higher level and all the way until you reach. So, but remember that the Jatis definitely dictate every single thing in India. Down to who you can marry. If you're a plumber, you have to marry the daughter of a plumber. And your children will marry other plumber children's. Okay, so you're always going to be in that Jati, unless, like I said, somehow, which this was a small part, okay, unless, because it's very rigid, somehow you're able to acquire land. If you're able to acquire land, then yes, you can move up just a tad bit. So remember that the Jatis dictated everything, who you could marry, and your occupation defined which Jati you were in. And remember that the Jatis are located in the caste system. The caste system is, kind of think of it like a pyramid with 4 levels, and then you've got a break, and then you've got the 5th level, which is the untouchables, okay, which is the bottom underneath. They're not even part of. They can never become part of, okay? So make sure that you know, you don't need to know the individual Jatis, but make sure that you know the levels of the caste system and then what's not included in the pyramid, which is the untouchables. All All right, so let's jump to the Roman Empire. So in the Roman Empire, they also have kind of a social structure also. And obviously on the bottom of their social structure, well, not even on the bottom, but underneath their social structure is slaves. Now, their slave population came from prisoners of war. Roman Empire is very militaristic, so they definitely start acquiring land. They definitely take the prisoners of war. And so those prisoners of war are who becomes their slaves. Now, the prisoners of war, when you become a prisoner of war, you might have some type of ability or some type of skill. Maybe you are a very good calligrapher, and so you can write, a scribe. Maybe you are a great sword maker, okay? You're still going to do that. You're just going to be a slave. You may be very good at organization or bureaucracy. You're still going to do that. You're just going to be a slave. And so the thing that I want you to kind of get from this is that no matter what, though, you could never serve in the military, okay? So for the Roman Empire, their slave population came from prisoners of war. And the second thing is that they could never serve in the military. All right, so kind of our fourth major category, and then I've got some just various things to attach. So is the patriarchal system, okay? So when you really look at the word patriarchal, P-A-T-E-R, which is the kind of root word, it's Latin for father, okay? So this is male/father centered, okay? And so we know with Confucianism, it was definitely the eldest male, which would be like the grandfather, great-grandfather, okay, for the families. So make sure you know this. Now, in regards to how women fared in these patriarchal societies, okay? So during this time, women are, first of all, their roles are women's roles during the classical era are definitely correlated. They're definitely attached to their reproductive responsibilities, their reproductive duties, okay? I said duties. So their reproductive responsibilities. Now, because women had the babies and then they had to take care of the babies, this tied them to the home. So this is what tied them to those domestic responsibilities, okay? So their roles were always domestic in the home, and their roles were also tied to their ability to have babies. So now, women's roles were also, they were definitely centered in the domestic setting, and men's roles, however, were very dominant in the public life. Now, there's one caveat to that, and that is that the Spartan women, however, had, during this time period, during this classical time period, okay, the Spartan women, they had fewer restrictions, and they could do things that men did. They trained, they learned to fight, they learned to defend. So just know that there's a caveat to that wasn't all the way through this time period. We do see that in Spartan things were a little bit different. So women probably, depending on how you looked at it, I don't really know that I want to learn to be a fighter, but depending on how you looked at it, they had fewer restrictions. Okay, so we talked about that. Okay, India and China during this classical era, their social systems are both they're riddled with inequality, okay? It's very hard for upward movement. You would never see anybody who lived in a lower class system be able to become a president or something like that. That never happened, okay? So India and China during this classical era were both riddled with social inequalities, but of these two, India's caste system is way more strict, okay? That's probably very improper English, I'm sorry. They're way more rigid, okay? So it's very, almost impossible. So tiny of the ability to have upward movement. Done all that. Oh, if I didn't say this a minute ago, make sure that you know the levels of India's caste system. Those 4 levels that are within the pyramid, and then the 1 level underneath it. Very important, okay? Now, and I'm trying to hurry. I know we're at like 15 minutes right now. All right, so know that Confucianism, remember this is very father-centered, very strict elder authority, okay? Now, when the Han Empire falls, this is going to allow, because that was their go-to thing, right? So this is going to allow for, when the Han Empire falls, this is going to allow for other ideologies to take root. And so what we see is Buddhism and Taoism starting to take root after the Han Empire falls. Also remember remember the day that we did the items where we had a station of Wang Mang, peasants, elites, landlords, and merchants. Of all of those groups, the merchants and the Yellow Turban Rebels, of all of those groups, the merchants were the most hated. You need to make sure that you understand how the merchants and why, because remember, they take someone's product and they pay them, minuscule amounts, and then they sell it for profit. So really, they're viewed as lazy, awful, atrocious, scum, all these things that you really have to look at and say the merchants are viewed very negatively. But I need you to make sure that you go back and look at how the merchants are viewed in China during this classical era time. All right, done that. We've already done this. Okay, so kind of the last thing before we go. So the Yellow Turban Rebels, which we know are a group in India, the Yellow Turban Rebels, which we know are a group in China, okay? And remember that we seen rebellions happen, the Spartacus rebellions, okay? Both of these, very important. So if you're kind of thinking Venn diagram, okay? The Yellow Turban Rebels in China, and then the Spartacus rebellion. Both of these, they encompassed, it involved a large amount of people, and both of them were violent, and the reason is because so many people were being oppressed. And so, like I said earlier, when you have 90% of your people that are peasants, those 90 can overthrow the 10. And the same thing is going to happen here. So both of those, I need you to remember the Yellow Turban Rebels, China, and the Spartacus Rebellion, Roman Empire. Both of these are going to be, they're going to encompass large amount of people. Large amount of people are going to be involved. You've got more people in the bottom. And it's going to be very violent. And the reason is because these people have been oppressed. All right, I have my notes that I'm going to put on Canvas. I'm going to take a picture of them and try to put them on Canvas. I don't have a scanner here at the house. And then you're going to have about 20 minutes to study when we first get in, about 15 to 20 minutes when we first get into class. I truly hope that you all have came out okay during the hurricane. I've missed you guys this week. And if you have any questions, email me, and I will see you guys on Monday. All right, bye.